Hi, my name is Eva Steiner and this is my project Psychotherapists Around the Globe. I am interviewing the psychotherapists around the world and asking them the same 8 questions. I am wondering how mental health profession is in their country. Today we are going to
Thank you for taking your time and doing this interview with me. Before we start, can you tell me a little bit about yourself?
Well, my pleasure. Thank you for inviting me and selecting me from Azerbaijan. I am Günay. I am 33 years old and I am a psychologist. I have my degree in Bachelor in Psychology as well as my master's degree. The work I've been doing for the last 8-9 years has been in humanitarian field, most of it International Committee of Red Cross, then a little bit with UNICEF. It's been working with the affected population who has been affected from war, violence. And for the last 4 or 5 years, it's been a lot of working with children and families who were in the conflict zones. And I worked in Azerbaijan, then I worked abroad. I was in Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, Abkhazia. And right now I'm back home in Baku, Azerbaijan. Actually, right now I'm thinking going back to practice in Azerbaijan. So this is something new that I want to try outside of any framework of a corporation or any organization, like more individual, but mostly with children and parents. This is my field of passion, I would say.
Tell me a little bit about your culture. What is some holiday or tradition that your country celebrates? And if your culture would be an emotion, what emotion would it be?
Culture-wise, we come from Zoroastrianism, which is worship, fire worship. Even though it's been decades ago, ages ago, still in every aspect you would see the symbols of fire everywhere. And one of the biggest holidays that it's coming, maybe you've heard from different countries, it's celebrated in Tajikistan, in Iran, it's Novruz, where we do a lot of stuff with fire, worship, and you jump over fire. It's like 7 days, every day there's a little games that you play, it's visiting the families. So this is, I would say, Novruz is the biggest tradition. And if emotion, I did think a lot about this question, what emotion, because you're like, it could be most of them, but I think Azerbaijan has this spontaneous nation, we are very, this fire going, quite emotional, and at the same time nostalgic. I would say we're very, to the roots, tradition. So this warmth and nostalgia together.
Can you tell me more about this nostalgic feeling?
Nostalgic feelings wise, we like to think of the past and feel good about that. Telling the stories from the past, sharing with the younger generation what was the older generation was doing, and sometimes even living in the past. Even you get together, not enjoying the moment, but more like talking about the past and the tales or what the grandparents used to do or the history-wise. And warmth, I would put in nostalgic, like Azerbaijanis, us, we are very, I would consider us very warm people, easily to communicate, talk, open. That's how I see us.
How did you become a psychotherapist in your country, and what is your therapeutic approach?
I studied abroad, so I didn't have a lot of practice here in Azerbaijan. But when I returned, I joined the ICRC, International Committee of Red Cross. To be honest, I just applied for a job. And then my experience has been mostly trauma-informed care. This is the approach we have used a lot because we were working with a lot of families and children with neurodevelopmental trauma, and adults were complex trauma. It wasn't just one incident. It was heavy violence throughout the years, could come from childhood or could be throughout that period. So that's why approach was mostly trauma-informed care that we were applying. And I would say Carl Rogers, also Rogerian approach, which I believe in humanitarian field we use it a lot because we believe that this humanitarian approach is unconditional positive regard to people, because you work with these people and they are not the ones who come and ask you, hey, I need support, I need psychotherapy. You are the ones who go and knock their doors and say, hey, I think your child, yourself would benefit from this service. So we are convincing them to get this service. So it's a bit different approach. Reverse. Sometimes it's like you call families, like I remember convincing that no, this child needs support, please. And so you have to quite humanitarian in that field, without any judgment, any stigma. You should gain their interest in this, because usually they don't have any understanding of psychotherapy.
And in general, do you maybe know how do you become a psychotherapist in your country? Do you need to be a psychologist, or can you just be a psychotherapist if you go to psychotherapeutic direction?
Yeah, this field is a bit sad because Azerbaijan doesn't have a license system. So there's not any official regulations in the government that you have to pass this as it is in Europe, in many other countries or West. And right now it's sad because you see a lot of people, they don't have a proper degree or even bachelor or master's. They just took certain therapy courses and they call themselves a psychologist. And people go to them because population also not very educated on this manner, right? So to become a psychologist, if you're the proper, of course, you have to have a degree, and then you have to have a practice, and then you can start doing your own, let's say, practice. But this is a proper way, and the ones who wants to follow the proper way would do it. But the field is quite uncertain, ambiguous. Anybody can be there. There's so many centers that working with children with developmental issues, but they're not specialists. Cruel, I would say, because it's a big harm to children and their families. Usually it happens through children because that's the point, that everyone would spend money, just believe anyone who would help you. So they use this, unfortunately.
It's like education. If you want to go this route, like having a master or bachelor in psychology, you can go.
Yes, there are universities. There's actually one, for example, famous one they go, it's Lomonosov, which is from Russia, but there's a little school here after them. But yes, there's a school, they have a clinical psychology, you can study and everything. But most of it, if you look at the curriculum, it's from Soviet Union. It hasn't been adapted to new dynamic changes. And there's another school, because I worked a lot with school psychologists. We have school psychologists here. It's called Pedagogical University, where they study from there. They don't have clinical experience, but they work in schools mostly. But yes, the system exists. You can go to school, you get the degree and everything, but the practice...
It's not regulated.
It's not regulated. No, it's not regulated.
Yeah. And separately from psychotherapy, like therapy direction, do you have schools for, I don't know, cognitive behavior therapy or...
For example, yes, CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, has been quite famous everywhere. So it's been also in Azerbaijan. And yeah, we have psychiatrists who went abroad and studied, and now they are training others. There are many training centers who do CBT. It's quite popular. And there are Shima therapy, also people start studying it. My therapist, for example, she's from Azerbaijan, studied from here and everything. She does Shima therapy. But she's I think the only one in the country who went proper the whole course with the supervision, with everything. Yes, it's getting there. Now I hear more or less, but you would count them. If you would count good therapists in the country, you wouldn't go over 9 or 10 probably. With the proper psychotherapy approach, Shima, CBT, or...
How society looks upon psychotherapy or any psychological help?
Society, and as in many countries, psychologists suffer with this stigma, right? So it's here the same. I feel like you can have anything. You can be diabetic, I don't know, everything, but not psychological issue, because it's such a shame just to have it. And there's a huge denial. I think a lot of crimes happen because people deny if they have people in their families who suffer from, I don't know, personality disorder or anything else, that they need treatment, proper treatment, to help themselves first and their family members. I don't want to associate disorders with the crime, but what I'm trying to say, it's about the emotional regulation that is lacking usually, right? And a lot of people, they don't know how to regulate their emotions, and that's why a lot of issues happen, be it addiction, be it crime or whatsoever. But people don't see the connection, unfortunately. We have this saying in Azerbaijan, if there's a problem, you just swipe it
under the rug.
Under the rug, and then it smells, stinks, it's bad, or like elephant in the room, it's big part of our culture. So people are denial, but the only part when they go see psychologists or they usually want to see psychiatrists, not psychologists. It's when the child has any kind of developmental problem, which is not part of psychotherapy. Only this, if child is autistic, Down syndrome, etc., or if there's anything emotional. No, you don't seek any support. It's usually solved within the family. But the new generation right now, they are seeking help. New generation, I mean, in their 20s, 30s. Yeah, I have a lot of friends who they receiving psychotherapy, but the younger generation now starting here and there. But in general, again, it's either children, developmental issues, and that's it.
And people know that the help exists, that if I feel that way, I can turn to psychologists, or also this connection is lacking? Or is stigma so strong that they know they have this information, but are like, no, but I am too embarrassed to go?
If you talk about from the society level, it has to be from the system, right? From the government system, that you should be able to get it for free, right? It doesn't exist. The system is not there. I know for the last 2 years I was working with governmental bodies. They try to work this system in every region. There's a cabinet you can go and receive support. Again, who's going to those cabinets? It's those children only those children with their parents who have developmental issues. Rather than that, people are not even interested if it exists or not. If you go and even do a little bit advocacy for it, you would not see a lot of interest in people. I mean, I worked in a lot of families. I've worked throughout whole Azerbaijan, because every district had a family who was, for example, repatriated from Iraq and Syria. And again, because that child specifically had neurodevelopmental or complex trauma, sometimes they couldn't just deal with the behavior. They couldn't. In the beginning, they said, no, we're fine, everything. In 2 months, they would call, please come help. I don't know what to do. But because we knocked their door and opened, and they knew us. But if you don't do this, people probably, very small percentage would go and seek that help. But again, I'm a little bit complaining, but I want to still emphasize the fact it has developed. If you look back 10 years, it was really, we couldn't even talk about. But now, for the last 5-10 years, you can feel the progress. That's what I want to say. But still not there.
Yeah, but I see positive progress, because even those children that are now visiting psychologists, they will be used to it, so they will have this in mind. My kids can go to therapy, or I don't feel well and I can go. So I think it's just a matter of time.
It is a matter of time, and I think the system also needs to push a lot on this to show availability, to show how the benefit of it, But I believe also in psychotherapy, it's always word of mouth. I like it. I say, oh, Eva, you should go. Eva likes it, says, oh, you should go. It's progress, I believe, as you mentioned.
How about the media coverage of mental health? Because usually also this helps to boost the awareness of mental health.
Media coverage, again, I haven't felt it from the government, like talking about mental health, or they are a lot of psychologists who are on their own pages, for example, Instagram or Facebook. They post a lot of things and try to raise awareness. But there's a lot of pop psychology as well that people cannot differentiate, right? But media-wise, no, I don't feel that people talk about, because again, Azerbaijan is not just Baku. Okay, Baku is capital, and I'm not from Baku, but I live here. But I have parents who live in different districts, and sometimes you can talk about the city, but that doesn't represent the whole country. So that's why when I try to answer the question, I think of the whole country. No, nobody talks about the mental health. Now I'm thinking, people who have panic attacks usually take it serious, any kind of vivid symptom, they would go as sick. But media, as your question, no, I wouldn't say anywhere that they talk about mental health. It's all, again, it's children. We can help your children with autism, with developmental, this.
What is your society teaching about child-parent relationship, and whether this value of society also influence how you design your interventions as a therapist?
Child-parent relationship, this is it's like my topic where I suffer myself sometimes. I lose my professionalism, when it comes to this. The culture-wise, there's a huge respect to elderly, authority, and then it's like your ownership kind of. It's a huge power dynamic between elderly and the younger ones, and usually the younger ones, they don't live freely their own dreams, on plans, because of this. Or obey, I guess that's the word. And then when it comes to attachment, there's a lot of anxiously attached parent and child. There's this, fight done, and then not be able to separate or not be able to solve the problem. And my observation is that because adults themselves don't know how to regulate their emotions, so they were not able to co-regulate with their children from the younger age. I would say people in Azerbaijan need to learn this in general, maybe all over the world, I don't know, but if we talk about specific Azerbaijan, okay, when they're older, a bit, maybe at the age of 60, a bit, I know that sometimes, this emotional things
Yeah, they mellow down a little
mellow
bit. Yeah.
down, right? Yeah, this neuroticism mellows down with the age. But when they're young, they still beat their children or emotional abuse because they just lack of this emotional regulation, and then they grow up and they when they're 50s and their children is the mirror, they don't understand why you this way, and they never ever blame themselves. It's this like defense mechanism is super strong, and this child is still asking for any kind of, not many of them, some children think that's okay, it's okay that my dad beat me up, that was done, so they still follow the same and probably repeat the same. But I see it, yeah, as a like emotional regulation, they lack it and they're not able to teach their children. And how it influences the therapy, I think a lot of people in need of emotional validation because they don't get validated by their parents a lot, which is the number one person we want to be validated, right? This is our everything. So emotional validation, attachment problems. Then when choosing the partners, you cannot find many people with securely attached. And in some families, the ones who still financially support their children, even they're older, it's like a little bit like puppets, Even though in your 30s, I'm still telling you what to do, who to marry, who to divorce, where to work, what to do. Again, newer generation, the Z generation, I like them a lot. It's changing the dynamic.
If an adult client would come to you and say, I don't want to see my parents anymore, I want to cut contact, how would you approach as a therapist, and how would society look upon such a request?
Society would look very bad because this is a big no. I haven't seen in my experience anybody like that to ask for this, but I've heard in different therapists that happen. If it's their will, and I think my approach would be, let's look at all the scenarios. What is going to be the output? How are you going to cope with this? Do you have enough resources or resilience to cope with this? Because it's not easy. Be it in Azerbaijan, be it in somewhere, the attachment is just very big, strong decision to make. And what is expecting them usually, if it's very toxic, I know that people push this button that I'm changing. I'm done with this relationship because of the manipulation and etc. I think I would support my client, but my role would be to let's consider. It's not a one night decision you make. Let's consider and step by step how we're going to do it and what expects you, again, work on their resources and coping and those skills to be able to prepare the client. But society would stone you. Unless it happens with dads. I don't remember a lot of people cutting their mothers, but a lot of people cut their fathers because usually father, if themselves cut and then they said, I am done, it's usually both ways. Happens. But with mothers, I haven't heard. Very probably rare cases you would hear in Azerbaijan. But fathers, I've seen a lot of people do that.
Why is that?
I think fathers probably, in the cases that I know myself, would be that they're also not that involved themselves. Mothers are more involved. They wouldn't let you go. Not saying it's a healthy way or unhealthy way, could be both ways. And fathers would say in the cases like, okay, or they weren't even there most of the time, or they were abusing their mothers. Usually in these cases, children say, you abused my mother and I'm done with you. Like, I am not done with you because of me, because it's difficult to do, but I am done with you because you abused my mom. To protect your mother. When it comes to abuse, it's Azerbaijan. Unfortunately, it's still women dying, killing women. Statistics are high, even though it's not published, but I follow some resources that I know. It happens. Also, we're big on selective abortion. Yeah, it's the issues are very vivid, not wanting a baby girl, all this femicide. So, yeah, I think that could be related to that too, that sometimes with fathers, they cut their relationship due to this. One of the big reasons.
What are the learned beliefs regarding client-therapist relationship, and can the relationship continue outside the therapy once the therapy process is over?
Yeah, ethical standards, people don't know. Again, like the psychologists that we train, It's usually school psychologists, again, psychologists who work for the governmental structures. Basic stuff that, for example, you're not supposed to go for a lunch or a coffee break or visiting birthdays. Usually they do. I know a lot of therapists, psychologists, like she's like, oh, I went to have a coffee like on a Sunday with my therapist. I have heard stuff like that. So it's not like strictly followed. I haven't heard about any sexual interactions, but I've heard from social worker this to younger children. So the answer would be there's not any ethical board or anywhere who would you call and complain. Again, if you have taken certain courses or ethical, if you, learned about this yourself, you know that this is the ethical standards that I need to follow. But again, many of them don't know. They just would visit each other, would go drink coffee and normalize this as this is something okay. They don't understand the negative impact how it affects the therapeutical relationship. So is the poor client, I would say, who doesn't understand. It's like, okay, she knows better or he knows better if he tells me let's hang out. But you could see this. It's not like, like, oh my God, no. You would not the ones that are really, because when I think of the really good therapists that we have, again, the ones that you would count, they follow everything, they receive supervision and they get their own therapy and everything. But the outside, they don't have understanding about this. I would put it this way.
To attach to this question, is supervision a must for a therapist in your country?
Nothing is a must for a psychotherapist in Azerbaijan. For example, when we were training people, we always had our supervision once a month, every 6 weeks with those people. And a lot of them never heard what is supervision. We were the ones who were introducing. But again, I'm talking about the school psychologists. I'm talking about the psychologists from the governmental institutions that, haven't been properly trained ever. They don't even have understanding. But no, it's not a must. And most of them also, they take it abroad. For example, they took the Shima therapy abroad from Turkey. A lot of them get from Turkey. And if that package has a supervision, they would take it and they would do it. But if that package is over, would they seek another supervisor to continue with their cases? Would they do this? I am not sure if they would continue doing this, but it's not a common practice, I would say.
But you feel it's lack of education about this subject, and that's why they don't follow, or they have an idea, but because the program is not demanding it, then I won't do it.
I think it's everything a bit. Some of them don't have understanding. They don't even know. And it's not easy to find a supervisor in Azerbaijan. For example, myself, let's say I want to start practice and I'm thinking, okay, I need to find a supervisor. And I'm thinking I would look for an international one. The other part, it's like, it doesn't demand who cares, who knows. I'm not obliged, right? Why would I to do it thinking of the quality or anything? It's just not there. It's most of them, unfortunately, the pseudo-psychologists, I would say, it's a business. It's mostly about the money. And again, if there is no regulation, you don't go to prison, right? So you just do whatever you want to do.
What are the common complaints that the client comes to therapy for?
Yeah, maybe I am not the best person to answer this because, again, I was the one who was going to people's houses. But I think a lot of people have family issues. There's a lot of in-law, daughter-in-law, mother-in-law issues, or like a lot of within the families could be the cheating and family-related issues people might approach. As I told you already, children with developmental. If you go to, for example, public clinic, you would see in the hallway it's mostly children with the adults. And I think depression, because some people, they continue with their functionality. So I don't know, sometimes they're not aware they're depressed, right? So if they're sick or not. Again, I'm not the best person because I haven't worked to answer this question. I'm thinking now, I would say relational problems mostly, probably. Because anything else, they go to psychiatrist. And usually they don't know the difference. Psychiatrists also have this, in Azerbaijan, they do think they're better. This
Attitude,
exactly. This attitude is there. And a lot of people probably just seek a psychiatrist's help.
And how is help available? Can you go through public health system and get psychological help, or do you need to pay privately?
No, you can. There is a center clinic. It's public. You can get registered and you will receive the support. Of course, there's a queue. You have to be in the queue, wait, it comes to you. They are expanding. They are almost in every district. Again, I was telling you, but the cabinet, one for child, one for adult, and people go there again, but mostly it's private. And I would say it is expensive for our nation. It's to go to pay, I don't know, $30 per session. It's not affordable at all. The good psychotherapist would cost you like $60, $50. You know, people would think, why would I spend this on this? I would rather spend it on something else. You know, you would never spend on this, but if you have a different, you're diabetic or you have cancer, I don't know, autoimmune, you would spend on that, but not here. You don't invest in your mental health. You don't. So the people who go, usually the ones who work in corporate worlds, who have insurance or who make okay money, sometimes we question who went to this because it's quite expensive for Azerbaijan, you know.
Would you say, is there any historical event that you feel is still influencing the nation today, like generational trauma?
Yeah, the war for sure. War happened in 90s. That was always, you know, talking about the in every song, in every poem about the lands, about Karabakh, it was always there. And after 21, the war happened again, and a lot of young people died. Of course, there was this feeling of victory, that lands are back. This feeling is there. Nevertheless, when you travel, you see the pictures of all the martyrs. Martyrs, they're younger, they're like 18, 17, 20. It's not every household, maybe every 6 or 7, every 10th household has someone who you know died. So, and this happened recently, 4 years, 5 years. And that's why this event is big, I think. And I worked, because I work in ICRC, I worked with the families of missing persons with these ambiguous laws. It's huge. It's huge. It's sometimes, again, we live in Baku, we live in our little bubble in this world that everything is good, but again, this doesn't represent the whole nation. And if you go to other districts, the one border where the war was happening, who have been always here in the shelling, I don't know, mine or everything, I think it's transgender trauma. And even, for example, on missing file, I want to mention that the families who went missing 30 years, they go through this ambiguous law, still waiting for them. They don't believe they're dead, or they haven't seen the body, right? This uncertainty. And this passes through younger generation, their grandchildren, they carry this trauma with them. It passes through. I think the impact of war is huge, huge. And all the soldiers who returned with PTSD, you know, they have to go back to community. Are there enough resources to work with them? You know, that's the sad part.
If you would share one tool, belief, or approach that is a must-have for you as a therapist, what would that be?
I believe we are the tool ourselves, the biggest tool. And I like a lot Rogerian, Carl Rogers' approach. And I believe in this unconditional positive regard. I really believe in this because, and it's not as easy as it sounds, because when you say unconditional positive, like, is it possible even not to judge? Because you're human, we're not robots, we're also human, we have our own history, you know, everything. But I believe in this approach when you see the person in front of you fully, and you say, I see you, I see your pains, I see your flaws, and it's okay, it's okay. And when you pass this to the client, and when the client feels this, and I think it's the biggest, this therapeutical alliance, you know, the relationship, if it happens there, and I see it as a biggest tool. Because if you don't have this, it doesn't matter what you use. Methodicals, tools, this, that, it's just not gonna work if you don't have the base for this, that I saw you. You know, and we're here, and I'm here to heal, and I do care about you. Okay, even within this hour or whatever, but, you know, passing this, I believe this is the greatest tool, in my opinion.